Welcome to week 5 of Buy Sell Watch on the Top Order podcast. It was moving week a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember what happened last week, but it's just the Rack and Opinion bar this week. So you get some Southern Hemisphere IPL content in your feed this week. We'll be buying, selling and watching all sorts of things in the IPL coming up after I push that green button over there, or Raj does. No, that's the record button. We want to put that one there.
Oh, but don't you want the record as well?
That'll help too.
Yeah, it was green at the time.
And now it's red.
Yes.
It's great.
We still haven't pressed the other green button.
No, Raj did.
Oh, fantastic.
No, and then we talked over it.
Oh, good.
Yep, this is a smooth introduction again. We are on fire. Binksy, no need for him to open the show next week. We'll continue to do it from here at Top Order Towers. Let's go to you, Stu, first, because you are in need of some investment advice this week.
Yeah, look, I said to you when I walked in, because often we don't plan out the podcast very much, but we do sort of say, yeah, well, it has been showing in the IPL for sure. But what we at least kind of say, like, give some advice about what we're buying and what we're selling, so that we can, see if we're all not going to talk about the same thing. And I said to you, I'm really struggling this week. I don't know what to buy and what to sell. So I want some advice. And the team that I mainly want some advice about is RCB, because it's often a team that we talk about a lot. Maybe because you've missed a couple of episodes, Raj, we haven't talked about them as much as we normally do. I think we talked about them in that first episode, and we said, they're a side who really changed their identity, I suppose, a little bit in the auction. They didn't go out and buy a whole bunch of stars. They seemed to be like kind of balanced role players. And when you look through their side, they kind of have all the elements of, the top, the opening partnership that you really want in the IPL. They've got Salt and Kohli doing a really nice job. They've got a strike bowler in Josh Hazlewood. They've got a finisher in Tim David. They're third, I think, as we're recording this. So why are we not talking about them? And I couldn't quite think to myself, like, why am I not convinced? I don't really know. So if anyone has any advice, what should I be doing? Should I be buying them or selling them? What's the deal here?
Yeah, I think, I'll go back to the old adage of 2 words: buy RCB, because they're going good. Mainly, you look at, you've mentioned all of those, players that they've got who make a difference. The one player that makes the biggest difference to this team is Virat Kohli. He is flying at the moment. He's scoring runs with ease. I think he's second on the hat table. I will be buying RCB. They've had some struggles at home, in their home environment. They've taken that monkey off their back this week by winning one at home, and they've won all their games away. It looks very rosy for me for RCB. They're broken out.
The Virat Kohli one's interesting, because I was kind of surprised when I saw him second on the list, and he's someone who normally doesn't slip under the radar in terms of the media, but he's quietly having, a fantastic season. He's, as you said, second on the run charts. I think I wrote it down here. He's, scored 392 runs, average of 65 at a strike rate of 144. It's brilliant. He's doing exactly what you want at the top of the order. They've picked up Salt. He's doing, he's chipping in as well. I don't know. They've got Hazlewood. I just can't believe that they're not a side that we've talked about in great detail.
You mentioned also that they've changed their identity a bit, and I guess they have, but they haven't. They've taken out, the Fafs and the Glenn Maxwells and all that, but they've kind of replaced them with similar players. I guess Salt's a bit more aggressive at the top of the order. Tim David's a better finisher, or as Maxwell's been struggling over his last few years, Tim David is finishing well at times. We've got Josh Hazlewood, who is taking wickets at the top of the order, which Siraj was struggling to do within that power play period. Everyone seems to be playing their role at the moment with RCB. They've won 6 out of the 9 games. Yeah, a strong buy from me.
Absolutely. I think they're getting value for money in this auction, whereas previously, and I don't want to heap poo on Glenn Maxwell, because plenty have done that this week on his behalf, but the money that they spent on Glenn Maxwell last year, they've got zero return from. The money that they've spent on Salt, on Krunal, on Hazlewood, on Tim David, they are getting returns from all of those players this year. So last year, they weren't getting that money realised into value. This year, they are. And I think we've seen a lot more consistency from them in the first half of the season, as opposed to last year when they were 1-6 and then came home with a wet sail and just missed out on the big chocolates. So look, positives for RCB, and I think plenty of people will be talking about RCB going forward. I think because as you say, they're sitting third, they've got a big shot at the big dance this year. There are some big teams around them, but I think they're all all of the role players in this side, as you said, are performing really, really well.
And a massive game tonight to kind of show those credentials, right? They've got DC tonight. Probably, some people will have watched that game before they see this podcast. But yeah, massive game tonight, and they can really. I mean, I guess we'll get onto it in terms of that top six and how it all might play out. But yeah, big game for them tonight to really say we are, one of the premier teams in this competition.
They could leapfrog Delhi for second on the back of tonight's performance. And, depending on when GT play their next game, they could be top of the table for a little while. I think this is a really key matchup in terms of there being pivotal games now. We're sort of, 9/14 of the way through the season. What's that, like 63 and a bit percent
9/14
of the season? That game that could send either of Delhi or RCB to 7 wins. I reckon you need 8 wins and a good net run rate to make the playoffs. And that's why I'm watching net run rates this week. It's one of my watch list items. That net run rate for RCB is positive. The net run rate for Delhi is higher. So if they can beat Delhi, not only do they inflict a wound on Delhi, but they bring their opponent's net run rate down. So I think that's a real key matchup for RCB and Delhi tonight. Speaking of key matchups, Raj, do we want to come to you? There's a team that's flying this week, and I hope that investors have been throwing their hard-earned sort of hard currency and Bitcoin behind some of your investment tips from last week.
Yeah, I think, last week was fairly successful. If we could just build the podcast around the shorts of what I said last week around Mumbai going well. You guys said it as well. Mumbai going well. Rohit Sharma sort of turning up. He looked like he was about to break out. His batting was very different, and he has done that this week. I think he's averaging over 140 this week with a not out and a 70 that he got dismissed on. Look, they look really good. Sky looks good. They're bowling well. They're fielding well. What more could you want from Mumbai, apart from the fact that they're going to have to win every game to get to that 8-win mark that you talk about? But I'm fully behind them. I think that they can get there.
The Sky one's interesting as well in terms of same as Kohli, like the same kind of thing. I kind of looked at him and went, oh yeah, he's doing okay. But then you look at actually every single, you look at his last 10 performances. I don't think he's scored less than, I think 26 is maybe his lowest score. He's now up to 4th in the run charts, 373 runs at 62, average of 160 or strike rate of 166, which is very much like him batting at that speed. And he's now starting to play consequential innings. Before at the start of the tournament, he was playing innings that were 20s and 40s, and playing an important role, doing his bit. But now he's playing, with Rohit getting off to flying starts. If those guys are going, and you then add Bumrah, Boult's, come back in this week and taken 4 for. He's Mitchell Santner's starting to, although not take the wickets, starting to bowl. I think he bowled 3 overs for 11 or something the other day. Starting to actually that unit now that Bumrah is back is more. It's more of a unit, isn't it? It's more. You add him into any sort of lineup, it makes a big difference. But yeah, now it's all the stuff that we were talking about at the start of the tournament. Of look at all these star-studded players. And now some of them are actually starting to deliver.
You know what it does for Mumbai? It means that there is so much gravity that pulls in the direction of Jasprit Bumrah. Everyone is so focused on what he's going to do and how to combat Bumrah and all those kinds of things. Teams are planning specifically for him. They're potentially not planning for Santner. They're not planning for Boult as much. So it gives, again, those role players in that Mumbai attack a little bit more leeway. There's less that they're being targeted or planned for. And I think that's benefiting them. I think it's similar to the Steph Curry effect in basketball. There's so much attention paid to Jasprit Bumrah and how to counter him that it leaves potentially some of these other players open to a little bit more leeway. And certainly the pressure is off them to try and win the game for their team, because you've got this kind of guy that's at the center of their universe as far as their bowling attack is concerned. This is a big matchup again. I think this Mumbai LSG matchup tonight is huge, because Mumbai can, as you said, Raj, keep their chances of the finals alive. They've got one foot in the door, I think, then at 6-4 if they win tonight. They've got a good net run rate. I've been monitoring net run rates over the last week or so. The problem I've got with LSG now is their net run rate has slipped into the negative. So they're going to have to win and win big, I think, against Mumbai to get some of that momentum back, and also to fix up their net run rate issues. Because I had them as a dark horse to get deep into the competition, but they're going to need to win this game and arrest a bit of a slide. They've only won 1 out of their last 3 to get into those finals. So that's a big one to monitor this week.
Your net run rate point, I want to know why you're watching that. Is that because you think that there are 6 teams now that have all, because you look at that table and there is a bit of a break now. We've seen that. We were starting to see it, but it's actually formally happened this week, where at least, 6, maybe you could say 7 if you want to be really generous, have kind of broken away from the others. There's a 4-point gap between the Sunrisers and LSG there in 6th. So you're watching net run rate because you think those 6 now, it's going to be very, very tight all the way to the end?
I think so. And that's what I'm watching. I'm not buying it or selling it, but I'm definitely watching the net run rate, because I think between Punjab, Mumbai and LSG in particular, they are all clearly fighting it out for one spot. And I think if you have a look at the games that they play, Punjab play LSG obviously play Mumbai. So there will be some, 4-point games, effectively, those teams playing each other. But I think it's entirely possible, although Punjab, will talk about them and losing a point potentially, having had that rained-out game against KKR, where they scored over 200 and had them, they have a 1 down when the rain came? I can't remember.
Just 1 over for 7, but...
And I think also, there's a checkable fact as well. Previous editions of the IPL, it feels like teams have broken away at the top. That hasn't happened this time. It's completely feasible that GT or DC don't make the playoffs based on the points that they've got at the moment.
Yep.
They could lose for 66% of their games, 4 of their next 6, and not make it in. So net run rate becomes really important across that top 6.
Yeah.
Well, and I think maybe this leads to a point that I wanted to ask you guys. Do we think this as well? Because particularly maybe the 3 bottom teams, or even just the 2, if you want to be generous, to my Sunrisers.
Someone doesn't want to sell their
I want to be
Sunrisers
generous
stock
to my Sunrisers. That it's just those teams are going to continue losing, and that we often don't necessarily we see those games, even if they're in 9th and 10th, they might be competitive all the way through. Is it a case now where it's going to come down to those games where the top 6 play each other and actually have to knock each other out, rather than sort of the upsets? I mean, are we done with CSK and Rajasthan in particular? Are we writing them off completely?
Based on the media that CSK has done this week, I think that CSK has written themselves off, so I'm willing to write them off as well.
Yeah, I said prior to the show, I said I'm buying forks this week, and the reason that I'm buying forks, there's good money in forks and ladles, okay. I'm told. That's where the big money is. The reason I'm buying forks is because I'm putting them through Rajasthan and CSK. 7 losses now, can't make the finals. I think realistically, unless Sunrisers win 5 on the trot with brilliant net run rate, they're done too. And I would say that it's a pretty devastating blow for KKR to have a no result in the game that they really needed 2 points. So I think they're not done. I can't put a fork through them yet, but KKR are really on the bubble. But those sides are all competitive sides. You've got Sunrisers and CSK, who we all thought were going to be very competitive this year. KKR are the defending champions, and all those sides sit in the bottom 4. So there is no easy game from here on out. It's not like any of these sides are stone motherless last and can't buy a win. They can't find a way to be competitive. So the challenge with these other sides is I think that there are going to drop games against the bottom 4 teams, and that's why I think net run rate potentially could be a big factor going forward, either to separate 1 from 2 or 2 from 3 or even 4 from 6.
I also think it's very feasible that they lose games to each other. It's what we've seen all throughout this tournament is the first team can lose to the 6th team, no issue. I can see that happening quite often.
Yeah.
But we did sort of skip over that Sunrisers point before there. We've kind of been happy to put the red marker through the bottom two. What about Sunrisers? You're holding on to that stock very, very closely.
I think if I'm working with my head, I'm certainly not investing any more money in them, and I'm starting to think about whether I can back out of that position. I didn't love, I know they beat CSK, but I didn't love the way they went about it. I didn't think nothing about that performance that they gave against CSK was like, oh, they're back. There's something exciting has happened. They almost seemed resigned themselves, to the way that the season is going. They were chasing 150, which was not a huge total, and they made pretty hard work of it. They looked like they might, they might lose that game until Kamindu Mendes and Nitish Kumar Reddy kind of put a partnership together. And, probably the highlight of that game for me was Kamindu's catch was just like that. We talked about fielding. We've given a lot of noise to some of the terrible fielding we've seen, but that catch was unbelievable. But, back on your point, we talked about Salt and Virat Kohli, the way their opening partnership's going. There's a number of you look at those other top teams, they've got a partnership that is going well usually, that opening partnership, and it just hasn't happened for Abhishek and Travis Head. They've done it 2 or 3 times, and it's led to wins usually, but I don't know, they just keep getting dismissed in weird ways. Travis Head looks a little bit lost, like he's the last few games hasn't come out all guns blazing in the way that he has normally, and that worries me really. It means he's searching it to like try and get back into form. If you're confident, like we've seen so many of these other players, they just keep going. They're not worried about what's going on, and so it concerns me that he's gone. Well, maybe I need to stick around for a few balls, and I don't know. Just a lot of things are not looking that great about the Sunrisers. I'd love to see it. They're a side that that if those two did get hot, they could go bananas. But I don't know. That just doesn't look good.
The doubt's there for mine. The doubt's there. The decision making, the clarity of judgment's not there for Travishek, and it's become less of a Travishek and more of a travesty. I don't know how other media channels are reporting on that, but that's how I'm seeing it. The only plus to come out of Sunrisers this week is they've unleashed the Kamindu Mendes beast, which I think it's taken them far too long to get him into the lineup with consistency. I think this is only his 3rd game out of 9 this season. He's already shown me that he can perform at this level. He was a real difference maker in their last up win. If they're going to go on a run, they're going to need a guy like him who is a little bit hot to actually get them back into form and to drag Nitish Kumar Reddy, drag Abhishek, drag Travis Head with them and along for the ride. And it's going to be a real examination, I think, of Pat Cummins' leadership under pressure. He's made every poster winner just about in his captaincy career, but he's always had players performing that's enabled him to push forward and push for wins. I think this is the first time that we've seen his team underperforming. And so what I want to see from them for the rest of the season is actually to drag themselves out of the mire and do something with the rest of the season, because if they end up 3-11, I think that's a real downer on his captaincy legacy going forward.
So just going back to the Kamindu Mendes thing, did you enjoy the bowling?
Well, yeah, I love that. I love that he can bowl with both hands. I'm a big fan of that. I did. My kids were asking me why you have to tell. I still think you shouldn't have to tell the umpire. Like, I don't think you should have to tell the umpire and the batter if you want to bowl with the other hand, because not many people can do it for a start, but the batter can change what they're doing. So why can't the bowler? I'm a bowler, so it's all on that. You're both looking at me with blank stares.
Well,
so
I think you have to tell, right? It's for law.
Yes, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. But
you would like the law changed.
I would like it. Yeah. If you can deceive with the bat about what you're trying to do. We saw Prabh Simran, in the last game overnight. Ball's coming and he's just reversed it over mid wicket as a left-hander for 6. Like, why can't Kamindu Mendes? Surely it's less troubling for a bowler or for a batter if Kamindu starts bowling with the other hand. You got plenty of warning. You're going to see which way he frames up. So that's my pitch to the ICC.
See what you did there.
Yeah,
oh yeah. Can while we're talking about these bottom teams, I think I'm keen to hear what you think about CSK, because it sounded like a bit of a loaded comment there, the stuff that's in the media. You not so thrilled? You don't often see teams say we're building for next year.
The big one for me is I haven't really changed my opinion from early in the season where, Dhoni, I'm not sure what role he plays in this team. We talked about him last year and probably the year before, but he's sort of proved us wrong with the way that he's batted and how he's led that side. But it's all starting to fall apart, I feel, a little bit there. It's just not working for them. They're going searching for answers by using half of, it seems, the province to play in the side. I'm really concerned with how they're sort of holding on to Dhoni and not really looking towards the future in terms of what's that going to look like. I think they're holding on to what they have had. They need to start looking forward now. And I completely agree with what Fleming and even Dhoni has mentioned, whether it's him in the side or not. They do have to start looking now to next year. They don't have the artillery or the form or the confidence to do it this year. I'm completely on board with that rhetoric anyway.
I'm completely on board with the rhetoric. I think what we need to see is CSK invest in Rachin Ravindra at number 4.
It's sad to see
because I think he is the future at number 4 for that franchise. And I think, Gaikwad and...
he's struggled with injury, hasn't he?
He has. Uthappa. There are lots of experienced players in that team. But I think if you're going to plan for the future, wouldn't you give the keys to the engine room over to a player like Rachin and go, right, we're going to put you in the best position to succeed and we'll experiment around you and we'll just see what happens for the rest of the season? Because I think he could be, not that we don't already know this, but I think he could actually be a real shining light for CSK at 4 and answer the big question that we've got, which is who's going to carry the weight of the bulk of the run scoring for that team going forward. So that's what I would like to see from CSK in terms of experimentation for the rest of the season.
I would like to see Rachin Ravindra, Devon Conway. It'd be nice to see these guys. It's a New Zealand podcast, so it'd be nice to see these guys give us a bit more content, apart from Stephen Fleming in the media.
Definitely. The and last thing on those sides, I do have one other thing, but something I am buying from those teams in terms of Rajasthan, I'm definitely selling their finishing when they're in a, same as last week, when they get themselves in a winning position, they seem to find some way tough way to, find another way to kind of blow it or, all dismissed. It was Krunal picked up those couple of wickets when they were absolutely cruising, it seemed, against RCB. But Jaiswal again, honestly, that guy, if I could not be stopped if I could buy stock in him. I would just continue buying over and over and over again. Every time I see him bat, he's just a phenomenal player, and the way he goes about things is brilliant. So I do, if Rohit's going to be in great form, I suppose he's retired from T20s, hasn't he? So he's not going to be in that T20 World Cup. So that's one person out of his way. Abhishek Sharma's, dropped off this season, so he's not pushing for a spot. They got to get that guy, and he's got to be an all-format player for India. 100%. He needs to be there.
Yeah, I definitely feel like with Rajasthan, how winning becomes a habit, losing seems to have become a habit for them. They've got themselves in great positions. They've got a great roster. We're going to talk about DC a little bit later, spoiler. I think that their rosters are completely different in terms of, I think that Rajasthan are just packed to the brim. And that's why I bought their stock early in those first couple of weeks. And I thought they were going to go all the way to the top, and they just haven't. Jaiswal and the batsmen that they have gotten them to great scores or to looking to great scores, and they just haven't been able to finish it off.
Yeah. Can I pick up on that? Because that's what I'm selling this week. I'm selling finishes this week in the IPL. Because if you have a look at the run scoring charts, you have a look at the MVP table on ESPN Crick Info, there are very, very few, if any, true finishers in that table. And I think that generally speaking, finishers in particular, but all-rounders have failed to produce as many match-winning performances this year as they have in years gone past. It's been the specialists that have been performing very, very well this year. If you have a look at the ESPN Crick Info MVP rankings, the top 10 are all specialists. You have to go down to Sunil Narayan at number 12, who's more of a batter these days and bowls, a little bit. But, then you go to Markram at 14, Krunal at 15, and I'm being a little bit generous with Krunal being an all-rounder.
And Markram an all-rounder as well.
Golden arm Markram.
I'm being a little bit generous there, but it's not the Dre Russes, not the not the Kyron Pollards, the Dwayne Bravos of the world that are lighting up the IPL this year. It's been specialist openers, it's been wrist spinners, and it's been Josh Hazlewood in particular.
Yeah, that's been Krishna, that seam attack for GT. Yeah,
it's actually, I'll back up that point with another sort of reasoning for it, and I think it talks to a lot of things we've talked to around Kohli scoring runs and things like that. The pitches that we're seeing this year are pitches that you can't just go out there and score from ball one. Mm-hmm. You have to actually play yourself in and have a little bit of a sighter. Kohli has been trying to do that for years, and it's actually working for him now because there's not people coming in at 6-5, 6-7 and blasting a quick 60 or a quick 40 at the end. You need that platform at the beginning to sort of bat through. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the specialists do the job. The wins that are happening are wins with plenty of wickets in hand. If you're chasing, or you've scored wickets and you've scored runs and then you've taken wickets when you're defending, has been the sort of way to win. Pitch is hard to bat on, I feel.
Well, I think it's hard to finish on, right? Because if you have a look at that overnight game where Punjab got 204, their top three got 180 of the 200 that they got, right? And that's been the theme.
They left some runs on the table.
They really did. And I think other than Tim David, I don't want to big up Australians unnecessarily, but I think he's actually been good this year as a finisher for RCB. There haven't been that many finishers that have done a really good job of getting the 60 off 30 on a regular basis. That he's been at least semi-consistent in that respect. So I'm buying specialists and I'm selling all-rounders at the moment because we're just not seeing the traditional all-rounders being at the top of the tree as far as impact is concerned this year.
You mentioned that KKR game. We sort of briefly touched on it before. You think that was, I don't know, a sort of a loss for both sides in a way by sharing those points? How are we feeling about that?
Well, I think in terms of how we're monitoring closely the net run rate, I think that those points could matter in the end, especially for who was KKR playing?
Punjab.
For Punjab, that's a big loss for them.
Yep.
In the race to get to that fourth spot or third spot, wherever they're going for, losing to a team that's lower down at the bottom of the table means that they're going to have to beat someone who's higher up. I know that sounds quite logical. I've said that in my head, but I think that's 2 points that they feel they could have gotten close to.
Yeah, I feel like they certainly the way they batted felt like they deserved it.
They've done the job.
Priyansh again, if we're talking about left-handed openers, what I loved about him in this innings was the fact that sometimes when I've seen him play, it's been all power, it's been sort of all explosiveness. This innings that he played last night was a lot of beautiful cover drives and just a lot of calm. It was a really calm and composed innings, which is, I don't know, it's hard to say that when someone gets 49 off 30 balls or something, but, it felt like he was completely in control. So, I just loved what I saw from him, and it gives me confidence that he's not just someone who's going to just go out there and throw the bat around and be someone who is hit or miss in that way that we've seen from the Sunrisers openers. It gives me more confidence that, him and Prabhsimran are actually a partnership that can, between them, bat very well and competently throughout this tournament.
Can I just pick up on that? Because I think you've touched on a word there that really hits home for me in terms of the success of certain players in this IPL that have really driven their teams to the top of the table, and that's composure. If you think about Joss Buttler, if you think about Virat Kohli, and you think about those two openers that you mentioned, Arya and Prabhsimran Singh, they bat with composure. Yes, they can be explosive, but even when the going gets tough, and we saw that Jofra Archer spell when we were watching the highlights on the wee hours of Saturday morning, all three of us, that was a very difficult spell to navigate. He was getting the ball to really talk. He was getting bounce, etc. And it took a great deal of composure to get through that spell out the other side. And then, Virat's team were able to go on and score big. But it's the guys that can show composure, particularly in the first 6 overs, that are leading their teams to success this year. The guys that have gone full-on hell for leather, Travis Head and Abhishek in particular.
And KKR's openers were like that. That's basically the tournament 2 finalists from last year were the 2 opening partnerships that went nuts.
Exactly.
And look at where they both are now. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting point that you nailed on there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and possibly the pitches. It certainly has felt that way since that early week where we talked about it last week, where there was all those scores over 200, and it just seems to now 200, 180 is sort of what we're now looking for in terms of getting there.
I've got one more thing on my run sheet. Do we have anything else that's specifically IPL buy sell watch related that we wanted to cover before we get on to the last item? Buy
anything you can in Mumbai.
Yeah.
The other one I did want to talk about that we didn't really mention much of last week was DC, because again, they've got a pivotal game tonight against RCB. They, at the time of recording last week, when Binksy sprung upon us, who are you at a halfway mark? Who are you now saying is going to win the tournament? They were leading the tournament, and none of us jumped on and said, invest in DC. We gave them. I think we've given them respect in this tournament. They've done a lot of good things, but why are we not pouncing on DC? They haven't really put a foot wrong all season. Why do we remain unconvinced, or did we just not mention them because we like other teams more?
I remain unconvinced, and I'm going to tie it back to when we talked about Rajasthan. I just don't see the household names in that team. I mean, they've got the likes of Stark, they've got KL Rahul, they've got Kuldeep Yadav, and a host of other names that can contribute. But I look at that team and I'm like, they've won all of those games in a row to start off the tournament. That's great. Can they continue that all the way through? I don't feel they can. I mean, even if you look back at their fixtures, even they beat Sunrisers in Chennai, which doesn't seem to be that big a thing this year. No. But even the win against the Super Giants, three balls to go, they've snuck home there. The Rajasthan one was a super over.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a couple of very, very close wins in and amongst that. If they had gone the other way, they'd be at 4 points less than they're currently on, well down the table.
They are the clutch team of the year so far, aren't they, really? Because all of the clutch games, all of those close games have come up with wins for Delhi. And it's weird because I think of all the players that we've talked about a lot in this IPL season, we haven't really talked about KL Rahul very much, but he has been so important to their success. And it shouldn't really surprise us, because whenever India are successful, often it's KL Rahul that gets them out of a jam or glues them together over the last 18 months. Yeah, exactly. And he's been super important for this side. Look, I go back to the start of the tournament when you were talking up Akshar as being a really important cog for the Delhi Capitals, and he's certainly proving that way with the bat. I'm not sure that he's so impactful with the ball as we thought that he would be.
Yeah.
But his batting, I mean, he batted at 4 in that last up win against Lucknow, and got them home with 34 off 20 alongside, you guessed it, that man KL Rahul. So I feel like that's a very balanced side. And if we talk about composure being the most important aspect of play in this IPL, KL Rahul's probably the most composed Indian player that you could get, other than maybe Virat Kohli and maybe even Rohit Sharma. So, he's got all of the chops, as far as I'm concerned, to steer his team towards victory. And they're getting stuff out of, as you say, they're getting stuff out of Kuldeep. They're getting stuff out of Mitchell Stark this year.
Yeah.
They're getting good performances out of him, where previous iterations of the IPL, he's only really shown up in the final.
We've Akshar's spin hasn't been as important because we've had Vipraj come to the fore. We've had Kuldeep taking a lot of wickets. We talked about their batting. They've had a lot of different contributors. Tristan Stubbs has played an important innings. Parel, Karun Nair's looking fantastic, sort of out of nowhere, at least for me. You go back and look at his domestic form, and maybe it wasn't out of nowhere because there were hundreds galore there. But yeah, they seem to have a lot of different contributors. I don't know. I feel like that's a positive that they're winning these games. They're sort of doing the thing that that New Zealand is always lauded for sticking in games, being there at the right time, and being able to, like Mukesh bowled that brilliant Yorker to pick up the wicket of Mitchell Marsh at that key moment when in that game, and then suddenly the game changes.
So synergy is the right word there. The sum of they're more than the sum of their parts across this team. But I feel like if one of those roles, if two of those roles fall off, we're in a bit of trouble here, and we're starting to hit that red button or the warning bell, if you will. I want to attack your green and gold coloured glasses at the moment.
Okay, good.
Around Mitchell Starc. Like, he good bowler. He's done well. He's taken 11 wickets so far in this tournament. 5 of those were in one game. Earlier in the tournament. I think that he's been okay throughout the rest of the tournament, apart from that 5-for, and he bowled that super over well to get to the super over initially. But I'm not sure that, when we talk about having these impact players, is he going to meet his 3 to 4 games that he wins on his own threshold that we seem to put on?
Yeah, it's a good point. If you have a look at the wickets and you take the 5-for out of it, then yes, there's only 6 wickets in 8 games or whatever it is. But I think the biggest impact that he had on any of the games was when he had 1 for 36 and he bowled a terrific 19th over to get Delhi within shouting distance of winning that game. They got to a super over, and then he bowled a terrific super over, and he's executed brilliantly in the back half of games. I think the difference with Mitchell Starc this year as opposed to years gone past is that, okay, it might not show up in the W column, but his execution, particularly late in games, has been far, far better this year than it has been in previous years. He's nailed the spots that he wants to bowl, whether it's Yorker or wide hole or slower ball bouncer or whatever it is. Whereas last year he didn't nail those and he went air miles and his team really suffered as a result. So I think the run rate and the economy is probably the factor that I would look at as his being improving over last season. And you're right, you don't necessarily see it in that wickets column as much as you do with Josh Hazlewood or Krunal or Kuldeep or any of those other bowlers.
Are we done with the IPL? I can tie my next thing that I want to talk about to the IPL if we want to, or
okay.
we can just be upfront and say I want to talk about New Zealand cricket for a little bit.
Cricket Club.
But I mean, so this is our gimmick here for this episode is buy, sell, and and hold. We've seen New Zealand cricket make a big investment. Well, at least we don't know what that investment is, but they've talked about how they have the opportunity to invest even more in basically Major League Cricket, and I think that what they've done is invested in the US cricket market is the number one thing that they've done. I don't mean I have. It's sort of like when we saw Suryakumar make his debut last week, and my mind was blown. My mind is kind of blown by this because I just have so many questions about what it means for cricket in general, what it means for New Zealand cricket, does all of these things. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, New Zealand cricket have basically invested in one of the franchises that Major League Cricket is expanding in 2027. So one of they will pick up some share that hasn't been disclosed. I think they have a certain portion of that share, and they have a chance to make it an even bigger part of that share later in the year if they choose to. They've been given an option to Major League Cricketers, I think, planning to go from 6 teams to 8 teams in 2027. In 2031, they're going to 10 teams, and New Zealand's got the opportunity to, again, invest in one of the franchise teams at that point as well. So they're basically they're saying, I think they're saying we think this is a good financial investment, but they're also with the whole, with the way they've outlined it, said that they're investing in, they want to basically bring this franchise in as they see it as part of New Zealand's domestic structure as well, and provide opportunities for players and for coaches and for pathways for ground staff, for logistics, for all sorts of things. So I just think it's fascinating, and I can't wait to see it play out. But, I don't know, thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me. I like the idea of it. What it actually looks like in practice, I'm a little bit unsure of. What does it mean for our Super Smash League? What does it mean for our players that are already going to those leagues? Are they going to sort of come back to us a little bit and play for the franchise that we've invested in, which is... It
hasn't been named yet. There's talk that the 2 cities might be Atlanta and Toronto as the 2 cities that pick up a franchise, but I don't think that. It's still yet to be determined.
And also, sort of, what does that look like from a international window perspective? This is one point I sort of thought about recently is, when we have had these players, sort of the top echelon of New Zealand cricket, go and play in tournaments around the world, we've had this sort of second squad go through and play in these other tournaments where our sort of normal or our better players are not available. What does that mean when we're in this window? Is it going to be the third set of players that we've got? Are we sending them on international duty now? So how does that all affect and still prioritise international cricket? But now we have a franchise lens.
Well, to pick up on that point, it sent my mind down all sorts of different avenues about, do New Zealand cricket think that we are now going to, it was talked about at was it at the ICC board meeting or whatever it was, where someone was pushing, right, or maybe that wasn't an ICC board meeting, maybe it was someone just in the media saying, or former cricketers or whatever, pushing, saying we should have international windows now for cricket. Mm-hmm. And is this New Zealand cricket going, we think maybe that's going to happen and we want to have, are we going to see a situation where at the IPL, we see a whole bunch of, I don't know that I don't know any of the owners would want to give up lucrative franchises that they have, but are we going to see a situation where we were talking about, the franchises kind of Mumbai expanding into all of the different franchise leagues? Are we going to see, international boards say, well, the only way we can kind of manage our international structure is if we're only going to see our players for these short international windows, we do have to set up a structure where we've got a team in the IPL, we've got a team in Major League Cricket, we've got a team in SA T20, we've got a team in the West Indies, we've got a team in the 100, the 100 in Major League Cricket kind of clashing is going to be super interesting as well. So you can see I've got so many questions about how this is going to work and whether New Zealand cricket is kind of looking massively ahead and gone, this is the future of cricket, and we want to be a part of it and kind of safeguard our international game by investing in the franchise game.
I've got a question for you, Baldy, but I'll talk through it to give you a little bit of time to think about your answer around it, because I haven't told you I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think that there's been any bearing on this decision based on the sort of contracting issues that we've had with our better players sort of going forward, with Kane Williamson, Finn Allen, all of these players, I named them off, Jimmy Neesham, Trent Boult, I think already, Lockie, I think as well, where they've sort of declined that central contract and they've, gone in favour of, playing around the world as a cricketing mercenary and then being available for certain series or certain ICC events. Do you think this has anything to do with that as well?
I think it 100% has something to do with that. I think it's a very savvy move for New Zealand cricket. If what they're buying is they're buying an opportunity to influence the structure of the squad. And I think the very difficult, very careful path we have to tread here is, what does ownership in a cricket franchise buy you? Does it buy you a certain number of spots in the roster? Does it buy you influence over playing decisions? Or does it just buy you investment in the financial outcomes of the team? We all know that in American sports, the owners have a big say in who goes into the front office. We all know that the ownership has a big say in big financial and transactional decisions about who goes into those rosters. And all of that stuff goes through the ownership group. So are New Zealand cricket saying we're buying into this franchise so that we can have some level of control and impact and influence over the roster that goes into that franchise? Because if they are, and if they do have that control, then yes, it's a terrific pathway for some of the players who are on the fringe of the ability to pick and choose their
teams, not get a franchise gig otherwise.
Their involvement, right? So I think it's potentially a huge win from a pathways point of view for players like Tim Seifert and Mohamed Abbas and Will O'Rourke and Zach Folkes and those young players that are up and coming that could benefit from having a pathway, having an opportunity to play big, franchise cricket around the world somewhere and using that as a showcase for their talent to other windows. So I think it's a potentially very savvy move for New Zealand cricket to get in first. They're effectively a first mover from that perspective as an international board. Great work from them. But I think the question that we've got to ask ourselves, and we've got to be a little bit careful about the governance of cricket here in terms of what does what does buying into a franchise get you from an ownership perspective?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it would be a very interesting thought case to go, okay, well, what if country X decided to buy into the franchise leagues in all these other places around the world and have that same influence to be able to put their players into those markets and have that control over the team? So I think it raises some fascinating questions, but I think you've got to give credit to New Zealand cricket for, one, being a first mover, two, thinking a little bit outside the box in terms of how they're going to secure the future of their financial game. And they're obviously making a big bet on cricket in the United States, following
that's the fascinating part as
following the pathway. And I think what they're looking at is going, okay, well, we're at the same sort of point of inflection that Major League Soccer was, 15 to 20 years ago, where Major League Soccer was just starting to kick off in the US. They were just starting to expand. It was getting some national exposure. It was having some positive impacts on the profile of some of the men's players. Other than Donovan, there were a few men's players that came out of that structure and, impressed on the world stage. So I think it's potentially a very savvy financial investment if cricket continues to grow and get backing of some senior tech savvy or tech leaders across that Western seaboard. I think that's where the money's potentially going to come from. And potentially the money comes out of the subcontinent as well. So there's a lot to like about what New Zealand cricket have done here, but it does pose some interesting governance questions, I think, for cricket going forward.
Maybe we could get Lionel Messi in a few years as well.
I think Wasim Khan would be a fascinating chat because he's plugged into the governance. We've talked to him on the podcast before. I think he would be a fascinating chat in terms of where's cricket going from a governance perspective and an investment perspective.
Oh, and I mean, it's the investment in the US cricket obviously is very interesting as well because, as you say, they're at a point now where I think from a New Zealand viewing point of view, it's at a time when when we don't play many games during that window. Yes, there's the 100 that's I don't know, seems to be struggling and maybe losing a bit of money from what we hear. So whether that the future of that, we don't know how that's going to go. It's at a reasonable time, depending on where in the US that they play the games and what times of the day. It's a time when suppose compared to the IPL, a lot of those games are on at 2 a.m. for us here in New Zealand, so we're a better chance of being able to watch some of those games. And there's the LA Olympics, right, in 2028. So they're investing just before then and saying we're putting a bet in the fact that this is going to boost the interest in cricket around the world as well. So and particularly in the American market. So I'm fascinated to see how it all plays out.
Look, I've got plenty of thoughts, but I'm extremely negative. I want to see what happens before I jump in with both feet. The major thing I can see, and I don't think anyone would disagree on the benefit, is if we do create some kind of pathway for the likes of Mohamed Abbas or some of our younger players. I don't really want to see them pushing our sort of 30-year-old players who are I want to see them pushing our young talent to use it as a development for our national squads going forward.
Well, and I think coaches. I heard Scott Wennick talking about how the provincial coaches are going to get opportunities to go over there and go and do stuff. So
as well. Yeah,
I think it's going to be a real how they want to, at least from the early talk, how they want it to work is for a lot of for it to really benefit lots of different parts of the New Zealand game. And I mean, we're going to have to see probably better facilities than we might have seen in the World Cup in some of those US locations if we want it to actually have benefit for us, because some of those facilities were not up to scratch, I would say. But hopefully that's where some of our ground staff and our we can assist in lots of different areas. So yeah, hopefully it's mutually beneficial, right?
New Zealand cricket's never been short of innovation, either on the field or off the field, never short of being keen to try things a little bit differently than the rest of the world, to try and level the playing field from a numbers point of view or whatever. I think one of the potential untapped opportunities for New Zealand here is to get some young up-and-coming cricket analysts, the kind of advanced stats guys, into the American system.
You're nominating yourself.
Data-driven analysis.
Data-driven folks of the that have played a bit of cricket, savvy with tech, those kinds of folks, early 40s, enough experience to know what they're doing, but still young and innovative.
Played cricket across multiple countries.
Exactly, multiple continents even. Could get in there and not only drive that forward across the league, but also then get in with the pro-American sports franchises, which we know are heavily driven, right?
Well, this ownership group's owns the 49ers.
So how much could cricket learn from baseball from an advanced stats perspective? Now, I'm not suggesting that we can Billy Bean our way to IPL success here, but if there's something to be learned, I think that New Zealand is now well placed to have the right connections and build the right relationships and get the right people involved to get themselves on the track to success.
Just to finish, and I know this. I said I would round it to the IPL. Do we ever think that an IPL franchise? Would we see an international side invest in an IPL franchise? Do we think that could ever happen?
I think there's only a few boards that have the lira to get involved at that sort of level.
I think it would have to be lira and some very creative accounting to get themselves to that kind of level, right? That's a lot of money.
There's a lot of money involved, yeah. And, there's ways to do partnerships with people who maybe want to be involved in the IPL who aren't, but I think probably a single stake for a single board might be a bit hard, especially because of the sort of imbalance in terms of what revenues are at the moment. We know it's really three big franchises up there. Three big boards that are bringing in the money internationally. So
we're really talking about minority ownership here, right? Yes. In terms of investing in a minority stake in an IPL franchise.
Yeah.
Because
but even minority stake,
even then,
an IPL team would be fairly
doable. Well, yeah, what influence are you buying in an IPL franchise?
Why would the BCCI want that to happen, and why would the owners want that to happen? Because I don't know the complete ownership model of the IPL, but those owners, any of those owners who've been there from the start, their stock must have risen, 10x, 20x in terms of, what the values of those franchises are worth now.
I think if you look at it solely from a New Zealand perspective, we have gained a lot from the IPL with our players who have gone over there, our younger players who aren't necessarily always centrally contracted, or, there are Glenn Phillips, when he was just starting, for an example, he didn't play much, but he was in and around all of those players. Carl Jamieson came onto the scene, and they were in and around the likes of Virat Kohli, learning, how to play the game and how to be a professional. So I think we have got a lot out of the IPL, but how good would it be to have a
I think Mitchell Santner is probably the guy who's benefited the most from being in that IPL setup, right? Because he's been around that CSK franchise for a long, long time. I know he's at Mumbai now, but when he was in that CSK franchise, he was learning from terrific leaders. He had terrific coaching, albeit New Zealand, had a lot of influence there as well. But he's actually been able to take that and develop himself into a terrific white ball captain, one of the best in the world, I think, from a leadership perspective, and certainly his nous and his savviness on the field. Is savviness a word, Stu?
Oh, that's close enough.
Good enough. So from that point of view, I think New Zealand has benefited, and I think no one more so than Mitchell Santner, and it remains to be seen whether the BJ Jacobs of the world will continue to develop and grow through the IPL or potentially through Major League Cricket as opposed to here domestically. I think we've done it. We've rambled our way through week 5 of Buy, Sell, Watch. We hope that you've got some sound financial advice that's not financial advice. Let me be very clear. We are not providing any form of financial advice here on the podcast. But if you've made it this far, well done to you. We will be back either midweek or at the end of the week. There's a bit of continuity there as well for Binksy as he gets ready for his midweek show. Wrapping up this podcast, any final thoughts, Stu, around this week in the IPL coming up?
No, another certainly overnight for us is a very big fixture sort of shaping those top 4. So that'll be what I'm looking for.
Raj?
I think, this time next week we'll have a lot clearer picture of what that sort of top and bottom of the table will be. There'll be a few more forks or red markers out, and there'll be hopefully less of a log jam through the middle, so we can start to make some predictions with a little bit of actual nous rather than just sticking our fingers in the air.
Beavers at work removing log jams, red pens everywhere except for the one that I dropped on the floor midway through the podcast. Thank you so much for sticking with us here on the Top Order. We'll be back in your feed soon, and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.